So without further ado, I might pass the mantle over to Daniel, and you're welcome to share your screen at any time, Daniel.
Yeah.
And look, in the absence of Fotos, I might try and chime in. That's what, Daniel.
Yeah,
the show must go on. For those who have just dialed in, we are one of our presenters is actually missing in action. Photo Melaisis. He's always got his head down a stormwater pit, so I suspect he's been caught a little bit. No, but long story short, he's having some technical dramas with his computer. But Daniel is more than capable of presenting in his absence, and also I'll chime in and drop some truth bombs as well on the way through as well.
Sounds good. I guess before we get started, the point of this webinar is just to kind of really show everyone the pollution found within stormwater treatment assets and just in stormwater in general, because so many of us spend so much time in the office not really looking at what's underground, what's in the stormwater. And so that's what today is kind of really about, to show you what we see in the work that we do out in the field. So I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, and look, as a side note, and Fotos would be saying this if he was here, like, and I speak from my experience, like I spent years as a consultant doing music models and designs, whatever, but it's not until you actually look down at one of these stormwater pits or a chambers or a GPT or whatever it might be, that you realise how pretty manky and disgusting stormwater pollution can be. It was a real eye-opener for me personally, so hence the purpose of today's webinar.
And so in terms of why kind of stormwater pollution is an important issue for us to be thinking about and considering is, firstly, stormwater is high in pollution. As you'll see by the end of this webinar, there is quite a lot of pollution and a lot of things that we probably don't expect to see in stormwater pollution. Also, 80% of marine plastic pollution comes from land-based sources, so the management and dealing with the treatment of stormwater is important, because stormwater is the #1 source of pollution in urban waterways. So it's important for us to consider all the different aspects of stormwater treatment, stormwater management, and just the pollution in it. In terms of Ocean Protect, we have installed over 57,000 assets, which is, we've got some estimations of capturing over 8,000 kilograms of pollution per day, with an estimate over 16.7 million kilograms of pollution to date, as Ocean Protect has been in place for over 20 years now. So we've been quite experienced in this space. So we're gonna break up the pollution in terms of the asset types, starting off with gully pit inserts. This type of stormwater treatment asset looks at capturing kind of gross pollutant traps, total suspended solids, attached pollutants, those sorts of larger pollutants. And so the aim of that is hopefully normally to use as pre-treatment to kind of capture those big pollutants, so then secondary and tertiary treatment can look at kind of removing those finer, more kind of hidden pollutants further down the treatment chain. So for those people who haven't actually seen a pit insert in the ground, this slide is for you. So you can kind of find these on the side of the roads in street drains, or in the middle of kind of a hard surface area, such as a car park or kind of a footpath. And so that's kind of what it looks like in place, but also without pollution, which kind of helps kind of comparison with the next few photos I'll be showing. So in terms of, these stormwater treatment, stormwater pollution is quite toxic. It's disgusting to look at. Like looking at this, you don't want to be seeing this in the environment. It's filled with all sorts of large gross pollutants, human-made, but also organic, such as there are leaves, there's sediment, but then you get those plastic bottles, the aluminium cans, food packaging, Glad wrap, and all sorts of other bits of human-generated pollution. And in terms of the pollution you find in stormwater, it's going to vary from catchment to catchment, property to property, asset to asset, really depending on what's happening in that catchment. And it can also change on a property or even an asset level, vary over time, because there's all sorts of different factors influencing what's found. For example, this one is a lot more organic based, probably indicating a much more vegetated area nearby, while the other ones were more heavily polluted with kind of the cans and drink bottles and that sort of thing, which is probably indicative of more people walking around and leading to that sort of pollution. So these images so far have kind of really been showing the larger pollutants, and it is quite varied. You get all sorts of different materials, and it is something that needs to be caught and captured before it goes further down into our waterways or ocean. And something for everyone to be thinking about in terms of the designing, the implementation of these assets and management of it is that things are going to change over time. 5 years ago, we didn't expect to have a pandemic happening a few years later with masks and gloves and those sorts of pollutants kind of becoming more common in stormwater, because we need to be installing resilient assets that can accommodate and treat stormwater today, but also thinking about the future and helping remove the future pollutants. In terms of providing some statistics around pollution, we did a bit of analysis in 2019 for a 5-month period, looking at 8 gully pit baskets in Western Sydney of an urban road catchment of 2,720 meters squared. And in this, we found 850 bits of plastic. This included cigarette butts, cans, plastic bottles, straws, all those sorts of things that you can see on the screen right now. But also 130 kilograms of sediment was found in those gully pit baskets as well. And it's great that we are installing these assets, that they're being maintained and the pollution is being removed, but we need to start actually analyzing this pollution to actually be able to see the change we need in this space. Because without understanding the type and amount of pollution that's getting captured and that's in stormwater, we can't really make the changes to prevent pollution from being created in the first place. So for example, in this one, we can see 228 cigarette butts. So we could think, okay, cigarettes are an issue in this area. So we could start working with the people working or living in that area and try to find ways to reduce that from becoming litter, becoming stormwater pollution. The next type of asset we'll be looking at is gross pollutant traps. So these are quite a common type across Australia. And so these, again, focusing on those larger pollutants. And so this is what it would look like from above, and okay, Fotos is joining. But so yeah, from above, freshly kind of newly installed gross pollutant traps, where you can kind of see the sump at the bottom, just water, then you can kind of see the screen area and you can see the inlet. For a bit of scale, you can see the construction image in the bottom right corner, just showing one, which is acting as pre-treatment to a chamber that was going to have some storm filter cartridges. And so in terms of how a gross pollutant trap works for people that don't know, there's just this video that kind of shows it a bit, just how water comes in with the pollutants and is spiraling around, sediment drops to the bottom into the sump, and then the larger pollutants kind of float. And so the clean water then exits through the screened area. Not sure if Brad has anything more technical to add to that, but
I can do. Yeah, look, we can obviously talk about GPTs as the cows come home, but yeah, look, this is a classic CDS system using centrifugal forces to create, I guess, a self-cleansing mechanism for the screen, and also obviously capturing a whole bunch of pollution. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. So in terms of what's actually being captured in these assets, you can see again, quite similar to the pit inserts, they're quite full of large plastic items, but also a bit of organics and stuff in it as well, but on a much larger scale due to the size of gross pollutant traps, as they can be quite big. And so it is good to be seeing this amount of pollution getting captured. However, the issue is these are then getting full. Like this one is completely full now, so any pollution coming that would normally come into this would just be bypassing the system and entering into a waterway or the ocean or wherever this is leading to. Some other photos just kind of showing you the different variants in loads, some a bit more organic based, some more human generated. But yeah, so that's just that. Another study that was done in kind of over a 3-year period in 2014 to 2016 was looking at 158 GPTs in the New South Wales LGA, where over 1,000 GPT cleans were done and over 1,693 meters cubed of pollution was removed. And so this pie graph just kind of shows that breakdown of what that pollution looked like, whereas most of it was sediment at 44%. There was also a lot of organics, which was 39%, and there was 17% litter. When you look at the images we've just been showing, it might be a different sort of catchment, so it could be different, but looking at those images, you see so much litter, but there is also so much beneath that surface because you're not seeing anything below the floatables.
And look, before you move on, Daniel, we should welcome Fotos. He's managed to sort out his technical drums. How are you, Fotos? Having a great day? Oh, we can't hear you now, Fotos. You've got to turn your microphone on. But look, getting back to the previous slide, Daniel, whilst Fotos is getting his microphone to work, yeah, look, GPTs do capture litter, but there's also a whole bunch of other stuff, particularly sediment, and that sediment is often quite dirty as well. A lot of heavy metals and hydrocarbons and other sort of attached pollutants assimilate to particulate matter. So we know if we remove that sediment, we go a long way to removing other pollutants as well. And it's worthwhile noting the images that Daniel has shown so far, that's untreated stormwater runoff. So you look at that and go, oh, it's a lot of pollution, but that's pollution that will otherwise go into our downstream waterways and creeks and rivers and oceans if these devices aren't there, or if they're there and aren't being cleaned out. So this pollution that is accumulated in these assets doesn't magically disappear. It does need to be physically removed, and that comes with resources and costs, etc. But from my perspective, and I know I'm biased, I want to help protect our oceans, waterways as best I can. That for me is money well spent. Can we hear you yet, Fotos? Is your microphone working? Still no good, Fotos. You can maybe check your audio settings at your end, the bottom left corner. Just check your audio settings to make sure you're selecting the right microphone. But it's great to see you though, Fotos. We'll keep charging.
So far the assets we've looked at are capturing more of those gross pollutants. So those pollutants that are greater than 5 millimeters. So those kind of big, pollutants. However, now we're going to start looking at kind of those finer, more kind of hidden pollutants that most people probably don't really see. And so in terms of a filter cartridge, this is kind of a normal setup. On the left, you can see what the outer casing looks like, and then the media as well, kind of very clean and fresh looking. While on the right, you can see the chamber for the filter cartridges, where you have a whole bunch of them in the chamber, where stormwater will come in and the media will treat the stormwater. I might get Brad to talk this through because he will probably be able to do this better than me, but I'm just going to play a video.
Yeah, and look, this is just a video showing how a storm filter chamber might work. So each individual cartridge is a storm filter. Water hits a weir and basically causes water to rise in the chamber. That activates the float to allow water to seep into the cartridge from the radial circumference. That goes down into a flow restrictor at the bottom into under drainage, and that you can see the self-cleansing mechanism of the filter when the water level subsides as well. But long story short, there's a whole bunch of fancy media in there to capture a whole bunch of fairly a range of pollutant types as well.
So yeah, in terms of kind of seeing what it looks like before and after it's actually absorbed and dealt with a lot of pollutants, you can kind of see it very white, very clean, but then after it's treated stormwater for a few years, it does become this kind of dark, smelly material that needs to be replaced and treated because, replaced so that we can continue the treatment of the stormwater there. And so these are just some photos, again, just showing you how polluted stormwater is. People don't really see this sort of stuff in the water because it is hidden, but once you actually put something in place that can actually capture that pollution, you can really see how dirty and, from the things I've heard, quite smelly material.
Yeah, look, basically, like, this is a classic. So this is from, it's really remarkable. This is from a site in Adelaide. It's a brickwork site. It looks like a relatively clean site. So just car park, nice trees, everyone walking around, having a great time. But these storm filter chambers or storm filter cartridges were in the ground for quite a few years. And you can see what has washed off this car park in this case. And I'll never forget one of the first times I joined Ocean Protect, there was without mentioning names, let's just call them, they were storm filters installed in a corn chip factory of some description, and the storm filter cartridges stunk of corn chip in question. So these assets, the media is very, very absorbent to a whole bunch of pollutant types. And yet when you smell it, you think, thank goodness this stuff isn't in the downstream waterway and creek. And it also makes me think also in terms of just vegetative assets, could a a vegetative system like a bioretention media handle this sort of hydrocarbon contamination in particular? Because we do know from studies by, say, Craig Forbore, which I think is who's joined, we do know that oils and hydrocarbons can block filter media in bioretention systems. So at least with this stuff, the filter media, we can just change that quite easily. All the other components remain, can be swapped out and reused. But yeah, it shows you what we're basically pulling out of these assets, essentially. I encourage everyone to come along to one of our factories and smell a storm filter cartridge.
And then, yeah, I guess also just to talk about, like, if there is no pre-treatment before a filter cartridge chamber, they can also be capturing a lot of the sediment and gross pollutants as well, because it hasn't been stopped further upstream. And then the next kind of technology to look at is filter membranes, which is again looking at similar sort of pollutants such as the filter cartridge. And so this is what they look like when they're fresh, they're new and just being put into the ground. So very white, very clean. How we'll kind of show you how dirty they can get soon, but first I might get Brad again to just talk through this video a bit, explaining how filter membrane technology can work.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You can see water will hit essentially a weir wall and force basically water to upflow through the filter media cartridges. So we call these little cartridges, they have what we call tentacles. So water has to basically be forced through a membrane before it actually surcharges back up and through the downstream pipe. If water gets too high, it can spill over a weir. This system can backflush as well. But long story short, water is being pushed through these membrane tentacles.
Yeah, and so yeah, once they've actually dealt with a lot of stormwater pollutants, they'll end up looking like this, not that white image that I showed you before. It's very dark and very polluted now, but close up, so people can kind of see how dirty and polluted this looks like.
To give some indications, like that, they're not all going to look like this after they've been in the ground for a while. I think this one, Fotos should be able to provide more detail, but I think this was in the ground for quite a few years. And I know there's been a couple of questions about the context of the sites as well. You know, what sort of sites are these, the catchments, etc. They're basically commercial, industrial, and high residential areas is where the most of these photos are from. So, you know, shopping centres, you know, Bunnings car parks, conchip factory sites, etc. I use the example of the Brickworks one before. That's just a shopping centre car park. It's really deceptive. You think it looks clean, but we know just from looking down into our pits and devices that, there's a lot of pollution that's washing off these seemingly clean areas. And obviously, stormwater pollution rates or pollutant accumulation and discharge rates do vary from site to site. Some sites are way more polluting than others. Typically, like commercial sites can be really quite nasty, but it's highly variable, not just spatially, but also temporally. So the same site can have a very different pollutant load characteristic from one year to the next. But obviously there are some bad offenders, some worse so than others, without mentioning names.
And then, this is just an image shown from above, kind of what it can look like, the top part of a filter membrane technology. And then, so we're getting close to the end of the presentation now, but what we hope we've kind of shown today is that stormwater can be very polluted, and there can be a range of different types of pollutants, from those more visible ones such as plastic bottles, cans, straws, those sorts of things, to the more hidden hydrocarbons, microplastics, those kind of finer, harder to see materials unless they're actually being absorbed by something. And so just to finish off, just some take-home messages for people. Stormwater is a valuable resource. With us facing climate change and kind of needing to work on decreasing demand on potable water as that is being affected by climate change, we need to start thinking about how we use water and where we get water from. And stormwater can be this valuable resource that helps us in this crisis that we're facing. But it does require it to be treated and managed properly so that we can use it for things such as watering gardens and toilet flushing and those sorts of activities. Because without proper treatment, it will remain high in pollution, such as this image and the other images I've shown throughout this webinar, there is a lot of pollution, all sorts of different types of pollution, and it does need to be dealt with. So in terms of treatment assets, stormwater treatment assets being put in place, they need to be resilient. As Brad and I have kind of talked about, things change over time, change property to property, catchment to catchment, asset to asset. So we need to be installing assets that work today, but will work in 5, 10, 20 years, that are dealing with the varying pollution to come and the new types of pollutants to come in the future. But also these treatment assets need to be maintained. It's great to see photos like this where heaps of pollution is being captured, and that is good. However, if it's not being maintained, these assets are being completely full, meaning any future and further pollution coming down near it is just going to bypass the system and enter into our waterways, into our ocean, and into the environment, meaning we've missed out on pollution that could have been easily captured, as this image shows. And to ensure that maintenance is happening, maintenance compliance is essential. We need local government and regulatory authorities to step up and improve their enforcement of maintenance on private properties, but also on themselves, and improve the way they're managing their stormwater treatment assets in terms of the public space. And so it's very easy to be saying that without any examples to look towards, but there is the example of Blacktown City Council's WSUD compliance program now. I worked for them for 3.5 years and helped them redevelop the whole program, and it is in a process of being a trial at the moment, and they are enforcing maintenance compliance on private properties. It is possible. It does take some work, but look towards what Blacktown City Council is doing. Look at their talks, look at the material on their website, or reach out to them via their email, which is wsud@blacktown.newsouthwales.gov.au. They are more than happy to help where and when they can. They are still a little under capacity since I left in February, but they are happy to be helping others, and because they are a leader in this space and they do want to help the industry in terms of that. And just in terms of leaving Blacktown Council, I am still involved in the WSUD maintenance compliance space. The idea of joining Ocean Protect was to look at helping build capacity within the industry in the space of WSUD maintenance. And so at the moment, what I'm working on with Ocean Protect is creating a framework to help councils with compliance. The idea being to provide everything councils would need to implement and manage their own WSUD compliance program, but enforcing maintenance on private properties, but also looking at the public assets as well, the management of them, and making sure they're being maintained properly. And so since this is very early stages, I would be keen to hear people's input, ideas, issues. We want to be creating something with councils for councils, because we want to help solve your issue. I've spent years in a council trying to solve this issue. We came up with a solution, and that's being implemented at the moment. And so I'd love to be helping on a much larger scale. Other councils solve your issues in terms of this space, because it is a challenge. The resourcing, the barriers that are put in place, being part of a government agency, I understand that. And so I'd love to help people. And so feel free to reach out at any point. You can also check out our webpage that's dedicated to this now, oceanprotect.com.au/WSUD-maintenance-compliance. And it's a bit long, but maybe we can work on that. But yeah, it's a work in progress. It's very early stages, but we would be interested in hearing from you, whether that's today in some Q&A questions, if people have anything, or in the future, happy to meet with people, happy to do calls, that sort of thing. And so Fotos wasn't able to join us today, but if you ever have any issues with stormwater, or issues or questions about stormwater pollution, feel free to reach out to Fotos and I. Our emails and phone numbers are on here, or you can connect with us on LinkedIn by scanning the QR codes. And so we hope that today we've I've shown that how polluted stormwater is and how important this issue is, and hopefully shown you some stuff that you haven't really seen before. Because yeah, I can relate to spending so much time in the office and not really getting to see this pollution in the real world. And so now I believe we'll be heading into Q&A, so I'll hand it back to Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. And look, there's a lot of questions already. This is obviously a super popular webinar. I can see there's 132 people in attendance. So thank you everyone for giving up your time. If you do have a question that you'd like us to answer, please put it in the Q&A panel. And it's basically a case of first in, best dressed. So I'm actually going to go right back to the start. I I think, yeah, Aditi was one of the first to answer, and I hope I addressed your question. She says, oh, sorry, he or she says it's she. Thank you, Daniel. It's fantastic to see the pollution that is coming into these assets. Are you able to explain the catchment context to some of these ones? Are the cigarettes in construction sites or established residential areas? Look, these are all established sites. I sort of touched on it before. There's a combination of generally the photos that were shown, generally commercial, industrial, or high density residential sites. That's predominantly where the most of our assets would go. Hence, that's why that's where predominantly most of these asset photos are from. Zoe White asks, I'm about to trial some inlet pit inserts as part of a litter prevention project, and in the process of determining how we'll monitor the litter captured. Wondering whether you felt that assessing 8 devices allowed you to capture sufficient data to guide source reduction. Also, how long did this sort of the sorting process take, and what framework did you use to categorize the litter? That's a fantastic question. So there was a few there. Did we feel that assessing 8 devices allowed us to capture sufficient data? From my personal perspective, it's better than nothing, and it's actually a pretty significant data set. You can see the pollution we find, but it's very, very consistent with what we see day in, day out. We are cleaning these assets out every day, all over Australia, and it's the same story. It's a combination, as per the pie chart that Daniel showed as well. Litter, sediment, and organics. And litter, when it comes to litter, it's predominantly single-use plastics, cigarette butts, bags, wrappers, bottles, and similar. So, yeah, it's pretty easy to use that as a data set and look at trends. If you want to look at a sort of a longer period of time, like obviously we would have seen a very significant change in pollutant export characteristics during COVID, for example. And we saw that in our device monitoring sites in particular, which is super interesting. Even like nitrogen levels in runoff, which is a whole other story. So yeah, it certainly, 8 devices was a significant data set. With more data, you have more confidence, but it's very similar to what we see. How long did the sorting process take? I know it was probably, and I know Fotos was one of the guys, it was about 3 or 4 guys on their hands and knees for a good part of the day, picking through that stuff. Very unscientific. There was no framework. It was literally pick through it and then take a photo and count it. But I think Daniel might have mentioned, we are in the process of collaborating with a few different groups, including CSIRO and OzMaps, to better understand the contents of the pollution that's being caught within our devices. Happy to talk further about that too, Zoe. Question from Carlo Favetta. They ask, how much of the captured plastic and metal pollution gets recycled or goes back to landfill? To answer that, basically, it depends on where you are. In New South Wales, all of the removed pollution and spent media is taken to a facility to recycle. From what I understand, about 90% of the waste stream is recycled and repurposed, and only about 10% goes to landfill. In Queensland and Victoria, I don't believe there's a recycling sort of process set up. It is done by others, separate to Ocean Protect. And unfortunately, all of the material that is removed is disposed of in landfill. But look, it's not ideal. It's not a complete circular economy, but it's better in the landfill than in our waterways and ocean. Sam Matios asks, can filter media be washed / cleaned at all, or does it need to be replaced? Is media used biodegradable at all? So if you look at the storm filter, all the components except for the media are reused. So we basically take like a swap and go system. I think Daniel's got a photo. So yeah, the media itself, we take it away and either dispose of it in landfill or recycled. But all the other components, the hood, the cage, etc., the little tops, etc., that's all repurposed. So it comes back to our facility. We basically remove the media and repurpose all the other components essentially. Shane Hardingham asks, same question from Shane Hardingham, sorry. Brilliant minds think alike, a minute apart, those 2 questions. Same question from Carlo Favetta as well. Renan Solitan from Byron Shire Council. Greetings, Renan. What is the ideal maintenance frequency and life cycle of these devices? So in terms of, and Daniel, I don't want to steal your thunder if you want to answer these, but But yeah, look, it depends on the device and it depends on the site characteristics. But the gully pit inserts, which Daniel showed at the start, we generally recommend inspecting every 3 months or thereabouts. And I think it's generally a clean every 6 months or so. The life cycle, those devices should last 25 years plus. The bag often does get damaged and will need to be replaced maybe once every 2 years or so. Often cigarette butts will burn a hole in these bags. I've seen. The other devices, it depends. I think the cartridge media generally gets replaced every 2 or 3 years. Sometimes there's a bit of a clean out of the sump required as well, maybe every year or two as well. And the GPTs generally cleaning out every year as well. You get a better idea of how often they need to be cleaned through inspections as well. So something we keep a track on as well. Sometimes you'll poke your head down and you realise it won't need any sort of significant maintenance intervention. Obviously, depends on how much rain falls as well. Courtney Henderson, greetings, Courtney, asks, such good photos. I'm having the best time seeing pollutants get trapped. Thank you, Courtney. There's these stormies. And as a side note, like I very similar background to Courtney. I spent 18 years in consultancy, and my mind was blown when I started seeing these photos and lifting lids or whatever for the first time. I'm sure it was the same thing for Daniel, and certainly was the same thing I know for Fotos. So we've got a fantastic story to tell. I think the general stormwater industry, and it's great. A medium like this, we can do that. Renan Solitan also asks, do these devices require a specialist maintenance personnel to ensure effectively to maintain these assets? Daniel, I can answer this, or would you like to give it a go?
I guess just like, so in terms of Ocean Protect assets, like we do have the, what are they called? The operation and maintenance manuals that are available for the specific assets. So if anyone can really follow those and do it themselves, as long as they have the right safety protocols in place and the right equipment, because there are people who aren't cleaning them right, and so yeah, they won't be effective, working effectively going forward. But there is also things out there like the Stormwater New South Wales training, which can give a bit more confidence in the type of people being able to do the work. So some of them are going to require a bit more technical experience. A pit insert is going to be a bit easy to clean out, but if you're looking at a filter membrane like a jellyfish or something, that is going to require a bit more technical knowledge and experience to be able to do such a thing.
The only thing that they will need, like the componentry of the devices, so the media, the cartridge, etc., you do need to get those from Ocean Protect. But certainly the maintenance, like Daniel indicated, follow the guidelines, get appropriate training, get suitably qualified. Obviously, there's still New South Wales guidelines and training put on by Murray, tick boxes. So yeah, it certainly can be done by others. And obviously then there's Filtera as well, by retention systems. Anyone can do that who's suitably qualified. Doesn't need us at all. Renan asks also, how do we model the efficiency? So all our devices are modeled in accordance with approved performance ratings in music, and all of those are based on peer-reviewed studies of real-world systems operating in the real world. But if you want to know more about that, you can just jump on the oceanprotect.com.au website. Each of our products, Storm Filter, Ocean Guard, Filtera, Jellyfish, Ocean Save, all have a review paper, all publicly available, and each review paper has all the performance monitoring studies and peer review reports as well in a just a one-stop shop format, which is hopefully easy to understand, very transparent. Sarah Joyce asks, what is the most efficient way to measure the types of litter being collected by devices? That's a great question. Daniel, do you want to go have this one?
Yeah, I'll have a go. Yeah, like I guess it's kind of hard to be able to efficiently measure the types of litter being collected. For example, with that analysis, it did require Fotos and a few others just sorting through it by hand. There are organizations such as CSIRO that are creating technologies that can kind of help analyze the pollution. So that might lead into a way into the future that can help analyze what's in an asset. However, at the moment, I'm not really aware of any super efficient way of being able to do it at a large scale. I think it would just be, you would be choosing certain assets in priority locations or priority assets and just kind of analyzing them by hand, unless Brad knows of anything that's better.
No, you bang on. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a pretty manually gruesome, time-consuming process.
But it's still important work to be doing if you have the capacity to do it, because as I talked about before, it's kind of helping you understand what's happening in that catchment can help reduce that pollution going forward. So if you have that chance to do it, you should be trying to do it if you can.
Cool. Lee Huan also asks, my colleagues are interested in and missed the webinar. Can I long story short, just the recording will be made available on the Ocean Protect website under webinars, probably by the end of today, so they can head to that, and it'll be a YouTube video along with the presentation slides as well. Courtney asked a very similar question around maintenance intervals. I hopefully addressed that, Courtney. So let me know if I didn't answer that properly.
I would just add to that though, because she's asking how often should these devices be checked in wet seasons. I guess in
Courtney,
terms of for Courtney, like a lot of times I see the thing talking about when after a major rainfall events happen, you should be kind of just doing an inspection to check it. So because the more rain, more stormwater going into these assets, the more likely there will be more pollution. So you have your standard frequency, but during major rainfall events, it should be checked.
Cool.
Or after.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. A question from Justine Barrett says hello. Thank you. Hello, Justine from CSIRO. Well done. A question from Maricia O'Shea. Great name. They ask which country is the main marine pollutant, and also how much pollution in percentage is generated by Australia. So if I can answer the first question, what country is the main pollutant? So there's a whole bunch of CSIRO research to show that the #1 source of ocean plastic in Australian beaches and in our Australian waterways is from Australia. Obviously, there's a lot of plastic pollution that comes down by in Northern Australia from Asia, particularly ghost nets and those sort of pollutants, but Australia is the main source of plastic pollution on Australian beaches. I think Philippines might be the country per unit area that generates the most plastic pollution and making it into our waterway. But long story short, plastic pollution is a problem shared by everyone, and everyone is contributing to this problem. How much pollution is generated in Australia? I think there's some very rough statistics that talk about 1.5 tons, I think 1,560 kilograms an hour discharged into Australian waterways of plastic, which is a fairly scary pollutant. I'm not sure if you had anything to add, Daniel, on that regard. Cool. George Kerber. We found, they say, we found Liverpool and Wallandilly councils do not want us to use pit baskets, which actually helps to obtain the TSS target. Yeah, it's a great point. I remember Brisbane City Council, where I'm based, they put in gully pit baskets all through the CBD, and they after a few years they removed them. Why? Because they were working too well. The maintenance crew. Sorry, there was complaints from pedestrians on the street that they could actually see pollution in these gully pits, obviously the gully pit baskets. So councils didn't like the complaints of people seeing the pollution, so they removed the gully pit baskets. A lot of councils and regulatory authorities and asset owners don't like assets like gully pit inserts because they work. They need to be cleaned out. It's a travesty. I'm not sure if you want to have anything to add, Daniel, former council employee.
Yeah, like every council has their different thoughts on the different types of assets. There's no kind of consistent thing out there of what ones work for everyone. But yeah, there's pressures on council to meet what the community wants. So this just involves a lot of educating councils, but also educating the community so that people understand what these assets are doing, what stormwater is, and kind of what's happening with stormwater.
Yeah, cool. A couple of comments. Loving the webinars. Keep up the great work. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Question from Kusha Kusani. They say, myself and Craig Wilton are from the Geelong area. Have you constructed anything in there? We do. We have put in quite a few assets around the Geelong, the city of Greater Geelong. If you want to find out more, like I'm talking about ocean guards, storm filters, jellyfish, GPTs. If you want to find out anything specifically, just let us know. Yeah, Zoe mentions, this is in relation to the contents or measuring litter in gully pit inserts. Tangaroo Blue have a litter data framework through their Strain the Drains program, and I believe there was another group in Victoria that also did something similar. Basically, a very labour-intensive process of analysing what was collected in gully pit inserts in various areas. I think there was one I think Kangaroo Blue might have done one in Gladstone as well. But yeah, Alan West, greetings, Alan. Alan says, hi, Brad, our latest filtration system looks great in Kingston. Thank you. I have seen photos. I agree. Thanks for all your efforts there, Alan, as well. Do you think sensors can work effectively to monitor GPT percentage for? Oh, that's a great question, Alan. We're actually working very closely with CSIRO, and I'm not sure if Justine Barrett has just left, but we've been working very closely with her and Denise Hardesty to develop GPT sensor technology, which is very exciting. Very cheap, low energy demands, very long batteries that can be integrated into GPTs, including gully pit inserts, chambers, and also GPTs, and probably other sort of stormwater infrastructure. Do I think they can work? Absolutely. They can work, and they will. So watch that space. I'll hopefully provide some more details in the very near future. Yeah. Steve Young, Brad, we're working on a project with Brisbane City Council at the moment in the city, and they are adding gully pits baskets to all the pits. So a win there. Winning. #winning. Thank you, Steve. Keep up the great work. Russell Cadman, I think was it your old boss, Daniel?
Yeah, I supported him for a bit.
Oh, there you go. Great presentation and photos. We need a no bypass pit basket solution for stormwater runoff around synthetic sports fields. Look, we could have a whole webinar on synthetic sports fields, Russell. I know Kangaroo Blue and OzMaps are doing a whole bunch of analysis showing that synthetic sports fields are a major source of microplastics, which should be no surprise. They are made from recycled tyres, and they release what we call rubber crumb, which is highly toxic to a whole bunch of fish species, which we've got a whole podcast on, Russell. If you're keen to know more, just let us know. And that's a lot of questions. If you have any further questions, if we've missed out on something or haven't answered something properly, wanted some more information, please put please drop a line to Fotos or Daniel or myself, Brad B at oceanprotect.com.au. I'm not as fancy and organised as these guys to have a QR code, but you can reach out. And thanks everyone for staying with us on this presentation. It was great to share this information with you. I wasn't supposed to present, so I feel as though I'm stealing Daniel's thunder. So I'll leave it to Daniel to do a sign off.
Thanks to everyone for joining us today to hear and see about stormwater pollution, seeing the types of stormwater pollutants and the work that we're doing and what we're seeing in our everyday job. Thanks for the great questions from everyone, and yeah, it'll be good to keep in touch with people and just kind of keep working in this space with everyone and just kind of helping stop pollution before it gets even to stormwater. But if it gets the stormwater, working together to remove it.
Yeah, and just on that, so Daniel won't toot his own horn, so I will. Daniel is working very, very hard in the background on this WSUD compliance program framework. So if you're keen to know more, so he's taken a whole bunch of, knowledge that he's gathered through his previous role at Blacktown City Council and working with Blacktown and others, he is developing this framework around how to ensure the appropriate maintenance of stormwater treatment assets or WSUD assets, which is a massive issue we know in our industry. So if you're keen to find out more and get involved in that program, please jump on this website and get in contact with Daniel. I'd certainly encourage it.
Yeah, because I guess just building onto that, because the idea is this is going to be something that can be applied across Australia. So my experience is in New South Wales, but I would be keen to hear from councils outside of New South Wales as well, and learning what your issues are and what you think could kind of solve your issues. And hopefully with the work I'm doing, I can help solve, Ocean Protect, myself and others can help solve those.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for your time, everybody. Enjoy your day and feel free to drop us a line if you've got any further questions.
Hey, everyone.